A mother poured champagne over her daughter's ex-husband at a formal gala and destroyed her entire family's future in 30 seconds. Picture this scene with me. A grand ballroom glittering with crystal chandeliers. Champagne towers catching the light like liquid gold. A string quartet playing softly in the background, while guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingle among ice sculptures and floral arrangements that cost more than most people earn in a month. And in the middle of it all, a woman in an emerald silk dress grabbing a silver tray loaded with champagne flutes and gourmet canapes. Her face twisted with righteous anger. Her target standing before her in paint-stained work clothes and scuffed boots. A man she considered beneath contempt. A man she believed had wasted 3 years of her daughter's precious life. A man who had no business being at this celebration. The champagne arced through the air in slow motion. Golden liquid cascading over his head. Shrimp mousse and caviar toast splattering across his worn jacket. Delicate pastries sliding down his chest to land at his feet. The silver tray clattering to the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. Laughter erupted from the table behind her. Her daughter's new boyfriend clapping with cruel delight. Her son joining in with nervous amusement. Her husband standing rigid with grim satisfaction. Justice served, they all thought. The maintenance worker had been put in his place. But the man covered in champagne and food did not react the way any of them expected. He did not yell. He did not storm out. He did not even look particularly upset. He simply stood there, champagne dripping from his dark hair, bits of food sliding down his face, and smiled. That strange knowing smile that had always made the woman's skin prickle with unease. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone with careful, deliberate movements, pressed a single button and brought it to his ear. "Sophia," he said calmly, his voice pleasant and conversational despite the champagne dripping from his chin. "It is time. The Hartley protocol, all of them, immediately." He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and looked around at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering longest on his ex-wife, who had sunk into her chair with her face buried in her hands, her entire body shaking. What they did not know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that the maintenance worker they had just humiliated owned every inch of that hotel, signed every paycheck they had ever cashed, controlled the company that had employed their entire family for decades, and was about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. Have you ever judged someone by how they looked, by what they drove, by the clothes they wore? What if I told you that snap judgment could cost you everything you have ever worked for? This family spent 4 years humiliating a man they thought was beneath them. They mocked his old truck, laughed at his simple clothes, made pointed comments about his lack of ambition, celebrated when their daughter divorced him for being a failure. But what happens when the person you have been disrespecting turns out to be the most powerful person in the room? What happens when your cruelty comes back to destroy everything you hold dear? Stay with me, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, if you are new here and you love stories that teach powerful life lessons, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this ends. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The Aurora Grand Hotel had stood on the corner of Madison and 52nd for exactly 100 years. A monument to elegance and old-world sophistication. Its marble columns and gilded archways had welcomed presidents and princes, celebrities, and titans of industry. For a century, it had represented the pinnacle of luxury hospitality. And for the Hartley family, it represented everything they had built their lives around. Thomas Hartley had walked through those revolving doors for 32 years. He had started as a junior concierge fresh out of hotel management school, worked his way through every department, survived 3 ownership transitions and 2 economic recessions, and risen to become the general manager, the face of the Aurora Grand, the man whose decisions shaped the guest experience for thousands of visitors every year. His wife Marguerite had joined the hotel 15 years ago as the head of hospitality relations. She coordinated special events, managed very important personnel services, and served as the social architect of the hotel's public image. Her attention to detail was legendary, her standards impossibly high, her satisfaction in her position complete. Their son Lucas had followed in the family tradition. At 28, he held the title of Senior Events Coordinator, managing the ballroom bookings and corporate functions that brought millions in revenue each year. He was ambitious, driven, already mapping his path to an executive position before 40. And then there was Celeste, Beautiful Celeste. Golden child Celeste. The daughter who had been groomed from birth for a life of sophistication and success. At 31, she had worked in the hotel's marketing department, crafting the brand image that attracted wealthy clientele from around the world. She had been good at her job, very good. But 8 months ago, she had quit. Right after her divorce, the Hartley family lived in a penthouse apartment that came as part of Thomas's compensation package. 23rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Designer furniture and original artwork and a wine collection that would make sommeliers weep with envy. They wore designer clothes, drove luxury cars, dined at exclusive restaurants where reservations required connections rather than just money. They had built a life that reflected their position, their status, their success. And they had done it all within the warm embrace of Aurora Grand Hotels, the company that paid their salaries, provided their home, funded their lifestyle, shaped their very identities. They owed everything to Aurora Grand. They just did not know who they really owed it to. But there was someone else in this story, someone they had spent 4 years trying to forget, someone who was about to remind them that appearances can be the most dangerous illusions of all. His name was Gabriel, and the Hartley family had a very specific understanding of who he was. The maintenance worker, the failure, the embarrassment, the man who fixed broken fixtures and repainted walls and did whatever handyman work needed doing around the hotel. The man who drove a 15-year-old truck that rattled when it idled. The man who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, all of them faded, all of them simple, none of them costing more than $20. The man their precious Celeste had inexplicably married 4 years ago. Marguerite had never understood the attraction. Gabriel was quiet where Celeste was vivacious, simple where she was sophisticated, content where she was ambitious. He seemed to have no drive, no vision, no interest in climbing any ladder whatsoever. When Celeste had brought him to his first family dinner, Marguerite had studied him with barely concealed disappointment. His handshake was firm, but his clothes were cheap. His manners were impeccable, but his watch was plastic. He spoke intelligently, but never about money or investments or career advancement. "What do you do, Gabriel?" Thomas had asked, his tone making clear that he expected the answer to be inadequate. "I work at the hotel," Gabriel had replied calmly. "Maintenance department. I fix things." The silence that followed had been excruciating. Lucas had actually laughed before catching himself. Marguerite had exchanged a loaded look with her husband, and Celeste had squeezed Gabriel's hand under the table, her cheeks flushing with something that might have been embarrassment. That was the beginning, the first of many such moments. But there were things about Gabriel that puzzled Marguerite, things she noticed but could not quite explain. His calm demeanor that never cracked, no matter how pointed the comments became. Thomas would make remarks about real men providing for their families, about ambition being the mark of character, about the importance of financial security. Gabriel would simply nod and smile that quiet smile of his and say nothing, his watchful eyes that seemed to see more than he revealed. Sometimes Marguerite would catch him observing the family with an expression she could not name. Not anger, not resentment. Something deeper and more complicated. Like he was waiting for something, testing something, measuring them against a standard only he knew. His strange contentment with work that others considered beneath them. He never complained about his job, never expressed frustration about his salary, never seemed to want anything more than what he had. It was unnatural, Marguerite thought. No healthy person could be that satisfied with mediocrity. The wedding had been modest, far too modest for Marguerite's taste. Gabriel had insisted on simplicity, a small ceremony in a garden, close friends only, no extravagance, no designer gown, no 5-tier cake. Celeste had agreed, but Marguerite saw the flicker of disappointment in her daughter's eyes, the first crack in the foundation. For 3 years, Gabriel had been a fixture at family gatherings, always present but never quite belonging, always patient but never quite accepted. The Hartleys tolerated him because Celeste loved him, but they made their disapproval clear in 1,000 small ways. Thomas's comments about ambition grew more pointed over time. A man should have goals, he would say, looking directly at Gabriel. A man should want to build something, to leave a legacy, to provide more than just the basics. Gabriel would simply nod. "I understand why you feel that way, Thomas." Not agreement, not argument, just acknowledgement. It drove Marguerite crazy. Lucas was less subtle. He made jokes about having a handyman in the family, about getting free repairs, about Gabriel's apparent comfort, with being the least successful person at any Hartley gathering. Gabriel would chuckle along with the jokes, seemingly unbothered, his eyes holding that strange patience that never wavered. And Marguerite herself contributed to the campaign. Pointed comments about Celeste deserving better, comparisons to Lucas's rising career and impressive salary, references to what a good provider should look like. She meant well. She was protecting her daughter, encouraging her to see the truth about the man she had married, the truth being that Gabriel was holding her back, limiting her potential, anchoring her to a life far beneath what she could achieve. What Marguerite did not know, what she could not have imagined, was that Gabriel endured all of it, every comment, every joke, every loaded silence. He absorbed their contempt like water soaking into stone. Patient, quiet, waiting. And in the privacy of his home with Celeste, he was everything the Hartleys refused to see. He brought her coffee in bed every morning, brewed exactly how she liked it, with a splash of vanilla and 2 sugars. He left hidden notes around their small apartment for her to find throughout the day, little messages of love tucked into her jacket pockets and inside her shoe closet and taped to the bathroom mirror. He remembered everything she told him, every story from her childhood, every dream she had shared, every small preference and secret wish. When she mentioned once, in passing, that she had always wanted to learn piano, a keyboard appeared in their living room the following week. He supported every ambition she expressed, encouraged her creativity, celebrated her successes at work, listened to her frustrations without trying to fix them, just holding space for her feelings, being present in a way that no one else in her life had ever managed. Gabriel loved Celeste completely, authentically, without reservation or condition, but it was not enough, because Celeste had been raised to value certain things: appearance, status, visible markers of success, and Gabriel, for all his virtues, did not provide those things. He drove that old truck, wore those simple clothes, seemed perfectly content with his maintenance position, while Celeste's colleagues married men with executive titles and investment portfolios. She began to resent his contentment, his refusal to want more, his strange satisfaction with a life she found increasingly embarrassing. "Why won't you apply for a promotion?" she would ask, frustration sharpening her voice. "Why won't you at least try to advance?" And Gabriel would look at her with those calm, deep eyes. "I am exactly where I want to be, Celeste. I thought you understood that." But she did not understand, could not understand. She had spent her entire life in a family that measured worth in titles and salaries and designer labels. Gabriel's contentment felt like complacency. His simplicity felt like failure. His refusal to perform success felt like a personal rejection of everything she valued. The cracks widened. The arguments grew more frequent. And eventually, Celeste made her decision. She filed for divorce without warning, cited irreconcilable differences, sought maximum alimony from a man she believed had almost nothing to give. Gabriel did not fight it, did not argue, did not beg her to reconsider. He simply signed the papers she sent and moved out of their apartment and watched 3 years of marriage dissolve with that same quiet acceptance that had defined him from the beginning. Marguerite had wept with relief when Celeste told her the news. 8 months later, Celeste had moved on. She had Damien now, Damien Forrester, the hedge fund manager with a penthouse in the financial district and a yacht named after himself. Damien with his designer suits and his expensive watches and his loud proclamations of success. Celeste thought she had upgraded. She thought she had finally found a man worthy of her family's approval. She had no idea she had traded a diamond for broken glass. Tonight was the Aurora Grand Hotel's centennial celebration. 100 years of excellence. 100 years of luxury and elegance and impeccable service. The ballroom had been transformed into a wonderland of crystal and gold, with ice sculptures depicting the hotel's iconic facade and floral arrangements imported from 3 different continents. The Hartley family occupied a prominent table near the stage. Their position reflected Thomas's 32 years of service, his importance to the hotel's operations, his status as the man who kept the Aurora Grand running smoothly. Marguerite surveyed the celebration with satisfaction. She had coordinated many of the details herself: the champagne selection, the seating arrangements, the timing of the speeches and toasts. This was her world, her domain, her triumph as much as anyone's. Thomas sat beside her in his finest tuxedo, accepting congratulations from passing colleagues with the gracious dignity of a man who had earned his position through decades of hard work. Lucas moved through the crowd, networking with executives and investors, already positioning himself for the next step up the ladder. And Celeste sat radiant beside Damien, her hand resting on his tailored jacket sleeve, the diamond bracelet he had given her last month catching the chandelier light. She was laughing at something he had said, her smile bright and performative, exactly the kind of woman a successful man should have on his arm. This was how it should be, Marguerite thought. This was the life her daughter deserved, not the life she had had with Gabriel. Damien leaned over to whisper something in Celeste's ear, and she laughed again, louder this time, drawing glances from nearby tables. He was charming, Marguerite acknowledged, confident, the kind of man who commanded attention simply by entering a room. Nothing like Gabriel, who had always seemed to fade into the background, who never sought attention or demanded recognition, who seemed perfectly content to be overlooked. Good riddance, Marguerite thought, lifting her champagne flute in a private toast to her daughter's improved circumstances. The string quartet shifted into a new piece, something celebratory and bright, and the crowd continued to mingle and laugh and enjoy the fruits of a century of excellence. Nobody noticed the commotion beginning near the service entrance. Not at first. Now, I need you to picture this scene clearly, because what happens next is going to change everything. If you are enjoying this story, drop a comment below telling me, have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances? Let me know your experience. And if you have not already, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. The commotion started as raised voices near the service corridor. A security guard speaking firmly but not loudly. Someone responding in a calm, measured tone. The sound of footsteps approaching the ballroom entrance. Marguerite turned to see what was disrupting their perfect evening, and her breath caught in her throat. Gabriel. He stood just inside the ballroom, framed by the ornate doorway, wearing paint-stained work clothes and scuffed boots that looked absurdly out of place among the tuxedos and evening gowns. His dark hair was longer than when she had last seen him. His face showed the weariness of someone who spent his days doing manual labor. He had no business being here. This was a formal celebration, invitation only, black tie required, and here he was in his maintenance uniform, looking like he had wandered in from unclogging a drain. The audacity, the absolute audacity. Oh my God, Celeste breathed, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Her face had gone pale, her smile vanishing like smoke in wind. What is he doing here? Looks like someone forgot to tell the help about the dress code, Lucas said with a smirk. Maybe he is here to fix a leak. But Celeste did not laugh. She was staring at Gabriel with an expression Marguerite could not quite read. Not anger exactly, something closer to fear. Damien leaned forward, squinting at Gabriel with amused contempt. Wait, is that your ex-husband? The handyman? He actually showed up to a formal gala dressed like he just finished painting a bathroom? He turned to Celeste, expecting her to share his amusement. But Celeste's hands were gripping the table edge so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Marguerite was already rising from her chair. This man had wasted 3 years of her daughter's life, had held Celeste back from achieving her potential, had been a constant source of embarrassment at every family gathering. And now he had the audacity to appear at the most important celebration in the hotel's history, dressed like he belonged in the basement. She moved through the crowd with purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, intercepting Gabriel before he could get any closer to their table. Gabriel. Her voice cut through the surrounding conversations like a blade. What exactly do you think you were doing here? He looked at her with those calm, unfathomable eyes. The same eyes that had always unsettled her, that had always seemed to be measuring, evaluating, seeing things she could not perceive. I needed to speak with Celeste, he said quietly. There are some documents that require her signature, legal matters that need to be resolved. Documents can be mailed, emailed, handled by lawyers. Marguerite positioned herself between Gabriel and the ballroom proper, blocking his path. You do not belong here. Look at yourself. You are an embarrassment to everyone in this room. From the table, Damien called out, his voice carrying clearly across the space. Security. Can someone escort this gentleman back to whatever broom closet he wandered out of? A few guests nearby tittered with laughter. Heads turned throughout the ballroom. The scene was beginning to draw attention, and Marguerite felt her embarrassment transforming into rage. Gabriel's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture. A subtle straightening that Marguerite might have recognized as significant if she had been paying attention to anything beyond her own righteous anger. Celeste knows why I am here, Gabriel said, his voice soft but clear. She knows what this is about. Do you not, Celeste? Celeste had risen from her chair, her face pale, her hands trembling as they clutched her evening bag. "Gabriel, please." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Not here. Not tonight. I am begging you." Something cold slithered down Marguerite's spine. Why was her daughter begging? Why did she look terrified instead of angry? What was happening that Marguerite did not understand? "Tell them," Gabriel said, his gaze fixed on Celeste. "Tell them the truth you have been hiding. Tell them who I really am." "What truth?" Thomas had joined Marguerite now, his face reddening with anger. "What is this nonsense? You are disrupting an important event. You need to leave immediately." But Gabriel did not move. He stood there in his paint-stained clothes, surrounded by people in formal attire, and he waited. Patient, calm, certain. And Celeste began to cry. Not angry tears, not frustrated tears. The desperate, terrified tears of someone watching their entire world collapse. "I cannot," she whispered. "Gabriel, I cannot." "Then I will," Gabriel replied. But Marguerite was done with this spectacle. Done with this man who had somehow reduced her confident daughter to tears. Done with the embarrassment he represented, had always represented, would always represent. She turned to the nearest catering station. A silver tray loaded with champagne flutes and gourmet canapes sat within reach. Shrimp mousse on toast points, caviar on delicate crackers, champagne worth $200 a bottle. She grabbed the tray with both hands. 4 years of frustration. 4 years of watching her daughter waste her potential on a man with no ambition. 4 years of subtle insults and pointed comments and hoping Celeste would come to her senses. And now this final humiliation, this maintenance worker in his dirty clothes crashing their celebration, making her daughter cry, making a scene that everyone would remember. "You want to know what we think of you?" Marguerite heard herself say, her voice rising. "You want to understand exactly how much you matter to this family." She threw the contents of the tray at Gabriel. The champagne arced through the air, golden and glittering in the chandelier light. The canapes followed, shrimp mousse and caviar and delicate pastries tumbling end over end. It all struck Gabriel in a cascade of liquid and food, champagne streaming down his face, appetizers splattering across his work clothes, the silver tray clattering to the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. Damien burst into applause. Finally, someone puts the help in their place. Lucas laughed, the sound nervous but genuine. "Nice one, Mom." A few guests nearby joined in the laughter, though most simply stared in shock at the scene unfolding before them. The hotel staff had frozen in place, their faces showing expressions Marguerite could not quite read. Not amusement, not approval, something else entirely. Gabriel stood motionless as the champagne dripped from his hair. Bits of food slid down his chest. His work clothes, already worn and stained, were now soaked and streaked with expensive appetizers. And then he smiled. That strange knowing smile that had always made Marguerite uneasy. That smile that suggested he knew something she did not. That smile that made her feel suddenly and inexplicably like she had made a terrible mistake. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone with careful, deliberate movements, pressed a single button and brought it to his ear. "Sophia," he said calmly, his voice pleasant and conversational despite the champagne dripping from his chin. "It is time. The Hartley Protocol. All of them. Immediately. Yes, I am certain. Thank you." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. And then he looked at Celeste, who had collapsed back into her chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I gave you every opportunity," Gabriel said softly. "Every chance to tell them the truth. Every opening to show your family who I really am. But you never wanted them to know, did you? You were ashamed of me from the beginning." "What truth?" Marguerite demanded, her voice sharp but uncertain now. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. "Rebecca, what is he talking about?" Gabriel turned his attention to her, and something in his expression made the temperature in the room seem to drop. He wiped champagne from his face with the back of his hand, a casual gesture that somehow carried immense weight. "Do you know who owns this hotel, Marguerite?" he asked, his voice conversational. "Who has owned it for the past century? Who signs the paychecks for every person in this room?" "Everyone knows that," Thomas interjected, his voice gruff. "The Winters family. They have owned Aurora Grand Hotels for 100 years. What does that have to do with anything? Gabriel nodded slowly. The Winters family. Yes, and do you know who the current heir is? The sole inheritor of the Winters estate? Nobody answered. The ballroom had gone completely silent now, every guest and staff member watching the scene unfold with rapt attention. Let me tell you a story, Gabriel continued. 12 years ago, there was a car accident. Jonathan Winters and his wife Elizabeth were killed instantly. Their son survived, but he was changed by the tragedy. He withdrew from public life, refused interviews, avoided cameras, became something of a mystery to the business world. He paused, letting the words settle over the room. That son inherited everything: the hotels, the real estate portfolio, the investment holdings, billions of dollars in assets. But he did not want to be defined by his wealth, did not want to live in a world where people only valued him for his money. So he made a choice. Gabriel met Marguerite's eyes directly. He took a job in the maintenance department of his own hotel. He wanted to understand the company from the ground up, to experience what his employees experienced, to find someone who would love him for who he was, not what he owned. The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Marguerite felt her legs weaken beneath her. The elegant ballroom seemed to tilt on its axis, the crystal chandeliers suddenly too bright, the champagne stains on Gabriel's clothes taking on a different meaning entirely. No, that was impossible. That could not be true. Gabriel was nobody. Gabriel was a failure. Gabriel worked in maintenance and drove an old truck and had no money and no ambition and no future. Gabriel could not be the heir to the Winters' fortune, the anonymous owner of Aurora Grand Hotels, the billionaire whose decisions affected thousands of employees, the man whose name was on the building, the man who controlled every aspect of their lives. But looking at him now, standing in the ballroom dripping with champagne, Marguerite saw what she had missed for 4 years. The confidence beneath the quiet demeanor, the intelligence behind the watchful eyes, the power that did not need to announce itself because it knew its own weight. And most damning of all, Celeste's continued sobbing, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with the knowledge of what she had thrown away, what was about to happen to her family. "You are lying," Damien said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. "This is some kind of scam, some desperate attempt to—" "Tell him," Gabriel said, his eyes fixed on Celeste. "Tell him I am lying. Tell him the truth." But Celeste could not speak, could only cry into her hands while the truth settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. "I am Gabriel Winters," Gabriel said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. "Sole heir to the Winters family estate, anonymous owner of Aurora Grand Hotels, the company that has employed your entire family for decades, the company that pays for your penthouse apartment, your designer clothes, your luxury cars, your comfortable lives." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush them. "And you just poured champagne over my head because you thought I was trash." Phones began to ring. Thomas's first, the sharp trill cutting through the stunned silence. Then Marguerite's. Then Lucas's, a discordant symphony of electronic tones filling the ballroom. Thomas pulled his phone from his pocket with a trembling hand. His face, already pale, went completely white as he listened to whoever was calling. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His hand gripped the phone so tightly Marguerite could see the tendons standing out on his wrist. He lowered the phone slowly, looking at Gabriel with an expression of dawning horror. "That was HR." Thomas's voice was barely audible. "I have been terminated. Effective immediately. 32 years, and I am just terminated. They said the owner personally authorized it." Lucas's phone call ended a moment later. He stared at the device like it had bitten him. "Me too. Dad and me and Mom. All 3 of us. Effective immediately." Marguerite's phone had gone to voicemail, but the notification blinked at her accusingly. She did not need to listen to the message. She already knew what it would say. 3 careers, 3 decades of service, everything they had built, everything they had worked for, gone in the time it took to pour champagne over a man she had thought was beneath her. Can you imagine being in that room right now? Everything you have built, everything you thought was secure, gone in an instant because of how you treated someone. If this story is hitting home for you, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the powerful conclusion. Gabriel pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. Fine silk, Marguerite noticed now, incongruous with his work clothes. He dabbed at the remnants of champagne on his face with careful, deliberate movements. The penthouse apartment is company property, he said calmly, as if discussing a mundane business matter. Part of the compensation package for the general manager position. Since Thomas no longer holds that position, you will need to vacate within 48 hours. My legal team will provide the relevant documentation. You cannot do this. Marguerite heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere far away. We have rights. We have contracts. We have... You have nothing, Gabriel interrupted, his voice still soft but carrying an edge now. You have exactly what you have shown me over the past 4 years. Contempt, dismissal, cruelty disguised as family loyalty. You made it abundantly clear that I was not good enough for your daughter, that my character meant nothing compared to my apparent lack of status, that I was trash to be discarded and humiliated. He looked around the ballroom, at the frozen guests and silent staff, at the champagne pooling on the marble floor, at the family who had tormented him for years without consequence. I endured your husband's comments about real men providing for their families, your pointed remarks about ambition and success, your son's jokes about having a handyman in the family. I endured it because I loved your daughter, because I thought love meant meeting people where they were, because I hoped, foolishly it seems, that patience and kindness would eventually show you who I really was. His voice dropped, something wounded flickering behind his eyes before the calm returned. But you never wanted to see me. You only wanted to see a version of me that did not exist. And tonight, you finally showed me exactly who you really are. Gabriel. Celeste had finally looked up, her face blotchy and tear-stained, mascara running in dark rivulets down her cheeks. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I will do anything. End things with Damien right now. Tell everyone the truth. We can start over, please. Gabriel looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression broke Marguerite's heart, though she had no right to feel anything but shame. It was grief, pure, unguarded grief, the sorrow of a man who had loved completely and been rejected for reasons he could never understand. You divorced me because I drove an old truck, he said quietly, because I wore simple clothes, because I did not perform wealth for the world to see. You were embarrassed that I was happy with who I was, that I did not need expensive things to feel valuable, that I measured my worth in character rather than possessions. Tears streamed down his face now, mixing with the champagne still dripping from his hair. I would have given you everything, Celeste. Everything. I would have built a life with you that valued substance over surface, a life where we loved each other for who we were, not what we owned. But you were never really my wife, were you? You were just waiting for me to become someone else. Damien stood abruptly, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and anger. He looked at Celeste like she had suddenly become a stranger. You were married to Gabriel Winters, he demanded. The Gabriel Winters? And you divorced him? Because he dressed badly? Are you insane? Get out, Celeste snarled at him, something wild breaking loose in her expression. Get out of my sight. Your sight? Damien laughed bitterly. In 48 hours you will not have anywhere to see from. Your whole family just got fired and evicted because your mother could not keep her hands off the catering. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. Celeste, I thought you were a smart woman. But divorcing a billionaire because he did not act rich enough? That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard in my life. He pushed past a cluster of stunned guests and disappeared through the ballroom doors, leaving the Hartley family alone with the wreckage of their comfortable existence. Gabriel was already moving toward the exit, his champagne-soaked footprints leaving a trail across the marble floor. But at the threshold, he paused, turned back one final time. The tragedy, he said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom, is that I actually loved you, Celeste. All of you. I endured your contempt because I believed love was patient, because I thought kindness would eventually reveal the truth, because I hoped your family would see past the surface to the person underneath. He shook his head slowly, champagne still glistening in his dark hair. But you never wanted to see me. You only wanted to see a version of me that did not exist. Someone flashy, someone obvious, someone who announced his wealth like a banner. And when I refused to become that person, you decided I was not enough. His gaze swept across the frozen guests, the silenced staff, the destroyed family. So I am giving you exactly what you wanted. A life where I do not exist in it at all. No jobs at my company, no apartment paid for with my money, No benefits derived from my success. You wanted nothing to do with the man you thought I was." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Now you will have truly nothing." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and through the windows, Marguerite heard the sound of an engine starting. Not the rattle of an old truck, but the purr of something expensive and powerful, something befitting a billionaire who had chosen to live simply, to test the people around him, to search for authenticity in a world obsessed with performance. The ballroom remained frozen. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Staff members whispered to each other, their expressions suggesting they had known something the Hartleys did not. The string quartet had stopped playing. The champagne had grown warm in forgotten glasses. Thomas sank into the nearest chair, his head falling into his hands. 32 years. The words came out broken. 32 years I gave to this company. And it is gone. Just like that. Gone. Lucas paced back and forth, his phone in his hand, frantically scrolling through search results. Articles about the reclusive winter's Heir appeared on the screen. Photos of a younger Gabriel in boardrooms and at corporate events. News stories about the famously private billionaire who had built his inherited company into a multi-billion-dollar empire while maintaining almost complete anonymity. "It is all true," Lucas said, his voice hollow. "Every word. He is Gabriel Winters. He owns everything. The hotel, the restaurants, the vacation properties, everything." Celeste sat motionless at the table, staring at the space where Gabriel had stood. Her tears had stopped, but the devastation on her face was complete. She looked like someone who had just watched everything precious slip through her fingers. Marguerite remained standing in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by the evidence of her catastrophic mistake. Champagne pooled around her designer heels. Bits of shrimp mousse and caviar lay scattered across the marble floor. The silver tray that had started everything glinted mockingly in the chandelier light. She had done this. She had grabbed that tray and poured its contents over a man worth billions. Over the man who employed her entire family. Over the man who had loved her daughter enough to hide his wealth, to test her character, to hope for something real in a world full of facades. And she had laughed while she did it. The documents arrived the next morning, hand-delivered by a lawyer in an expensive suit who waited patiently while the Hartley family signed receipt of delivery. Termination paperwork, meticulously detailed. Legal justification for the dismissals, including documented incidents of workplace harassment and conduct unbecoming of company representatives. The Hartleys' treatment of Gabriel over the years had been carefully recorded. Every insulting comment, every demeaning joke, every instance of deliberate humiliation. Gabriel had been watching them the entire time, documenting everything, building a case that would withstand any legal challenge they might attempt. Eviction notices followed. The penthouse apartment was company property, provided as part of Thomas's compensation package. Since Thomas no longer worked for the company, the family no longer had access to company housing. They had 48 hours to remove their belongings. And finally, a modest severance package, $50,000 split between the 3 terminated employees. Gabriel's final act of mercy, though it felt more like a reminder of how completely they were at his discretion. Celeste called Gabriel's assistant repeatedly over the following days. Sophia listened politely to each message, each desperate plea for a conversation, each tearful apology and promise to make things right. "Mr. Winters has left the country for an indefinite period," Sophia said during their final conversation. "He will not be receiving personal calls. I suggest you focus on rebuilding your life, Miss Hartley. That is what he would want for you, even now." The line went dead, and with it, the last hope of salvaging anything from the wreckage. Marguerite spent those 48 hours packing up the penthouse, touching objects that suddenly seemed borrowed, temporary, provisional. The designer furniture they had chosen with such care. The artwork they had collected over decades. The wine collection Thomas had built bottle by bottle. None of it was really theirs. It had all existed within the warm embrace of Aurora Grand Hotels, within the generosity of a company owned by the man they had treated like garbage. She found herself standing at the window, looking out at the city skyline one last time. The view that had represented everything they had achieved. The view that had made them feel successful, established, arrived. The view she would never see again. "How did we not know?" Thomas asked from behind her. His voice had aged a decade in 24 hours. "How did we work for his company for 30 years and never know who he was?" "Because he did not want us to know," Marguerite replied. She did not turn from the window, because he wanted to be valued for himself, not his money. because he wanted genuine connections, not transactions. She thought of all the times Gabriel had joined them for family dinners, all the comments she had made about ambition and success, all the pointed references to what a good provider should look like, all the ways she had tried to make him feel small, inadequate, unworthy of her daughter. And he had sat there and taken it, patient, quiet, waiting for them to prove him wrong, to show that they could value character over status, to demonstrate that kindness could exist without incentive. And they had failed. Every single test, every single opportunity, they had failed. Celeste appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. She was holding a small box, and Marguerite recognized the contents. Letters, dozens of them, the hidden notes Gabriel had left for her throughout their marriage. "I found these in my old things," Celeste said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had forgotten about them, about how many there were, how much thought he put into each one." She sat down on a packing box, pulling out letters at random, reading fragments aloud. "Celeste, you smiled in your sleep last night, and I wondered what you were dreaming. Whatever it was, I hope I was there with you. My love. I saw a flower today that reminded me of your laugh, bright and unexpected and impossible to ignore. I brought it home for you. To my wife, I know your family does not approve of me. I know you wish I were different sometimes, but I will spend my life trying to be worthy of you, even if no one else sees my value, because you see it, and that is enough." Celeste's voice broke on the last word. The letters fell from her hands, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. "I had everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He loved me completely, without condition, without reservation, and I threw it away because he drove an old truck, because he wore simple clothes, because I was embarrassed that he did not perform success the way Damien does." She looked up at her mother with hollow eyes. "I divorced the best man I will ever know because I inherited your values, Mom, your obsession with appearances, your belief that worth is measured in designer labels and impressive titles. I looked at Gabriel, and I saw what you taught me to see. A failure, a disappointment, something to be ashamed of." Marguerite wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, her family, their way of seeing the world. But the words died in her throat because Celeste was right. Everything she had taught her daughter about success, about worth, about what made a man valuable, it had all been wrong. Gabriel had been testing them, and they had revealed themselves to be exactly what he feared. Shallow people who valued performance over substance, status over character, the appearance of success over the reality of love. The moving trucks came the following afternoon. Marguerite watched strangers carry boxes out of the only home she had known for 15 years. Furniture that had seemed so permanent being loaded onto trucks like any other cargo, a lifetime of memories being packed away into storage units and borrowed apartments and uncertain futures. Thomas had found temporary housing with a former colleague, a small apartment in a neighborhood they would have considered beneath them a week ago. Lucas was staying with friends while he figured out his next move. His career prospects, once so promising, had evaporated the moment Gabriel made that phone call. And Celeste was going to stay with Marguerite, at least for now. Neither of them could afford to live alone. Neither of them had anywhere else to go. The penthouse grew emptier as the day progressed. Furniture disappeared. Artwork came down from walls. The wine collection was boxed up by movers who had no idea of its value. By evening, only echoes remained. Marguerite took one last walk through the empty rooms. The kitchen where she had prepared countless meals. The dining room where they had hosted so many dinner parties. The living room where they had laughed and argued and built a life they thought was secure. She thought of Gabriel standing in their foyer 4 years ago, meeting the family for the first time. His quiet demeanor, his watchful eyes, his patient smile in the face of their obvious disapproval. He had given them every chance, every opportunity to be kind, every opening to prove that they valued something deeper than appearances, and they had squandered all of it. The door closed behind her for the final time, the click of the lock sounding like the period at the end of a sentence, the end of one chapter, the beginning of accountability. She walked to the elevator with empty hands and a heavy heart, leaving behind the life she had destroyed with her own choices. Where was Gabriel now? She wondered. Somewhere across the ocean, perhaps, finally allowing himself to feel the hurt they had caused over all those years. Or perhaps he was already healing, already at peace, already grateful to be free of people who had never deserved his patience, his kindness, his love. She would never know. That door was closed forever, and she had been the one to slam it shut. The lessons of this story are ones we cannot afford to ignore. Never judge worth by appearance. The maintenance worker in paint-stained clothes might be the billionaire heir to a fortune. The quiet person who does not announce their success might be the most accomplished person in the room. We cannot see someone's value by looking at their clothes, their car, their job title. True worth is measured in character, in kindness, in the way we treat others when we think no one important is watching. Character matters more than status. Gabriel was a good man. He was patient and kind and loving. He remembered the small details. He showed up consistently. He loved completely. And the Hartley family missed all of it because they were too busy measuring him against superficial standards of success. They traded a diamond for broken glass because the diamond did not shine the way they expected. Authenticity is more valuable than performance. Gabriel chose to live simply. He chose to drive an old truck and wear humble clothes and work in maintenance because he wanted to experience life authentically. He was not pretending to be poor. He was living according to his values. And the Hartleys could not understand that because they had been trained to believe that success must be announced, displayed, performed for the world to see. The way you treat people reveals who you are, not who they are. When Marguerite poured champagne over Gabriel, she thought she was teaching him a lesson about his worthlessness. Instead, she revealed her own character, her cruelty, her shallow values, her willingness to humiliate someone she considered beneath her. The dirty stain was on her, not on Gabriel. Pride and shallow values destroy what matters most. The Hartley family had everything: good jobs, financial security, a beautiful home, a daughter who had been married to a man who loved her completely. And they destroyed all of it because they could not see past the surface, because they valued appearance over substance, because they were too proud to consider that they might be wrong. Gabriel had hoped for something different. He had tested the people around him, not out of cruelty, but out of hope. He wanted to believe that genuine connection was possible, that someone could love him for who he was rather than what he owned. That kindness could exist without incentive. And when the Hartley family proved that they could not be those people, he simply removed himself from their lives. Efficiently, completely, without malice, just the inevitable consequence of their own choices. The champagne Marguerite poured revealed the truth about everyone in that ballroom. Gabriel had stood there dripping, graceful in humiliation, responding not with rage but with the quiet justice of consequences deserved. And the Hartleys had stood revealed as exactly what they were: people who valued performance over substance, appearance over character, status over soul. Ask yourself this question: how do you treat people you think are beneath you? What does your treatment of the powerless reveal about your character? Are you performing success, or are you embodying integrity? Because somewhere out there, someone is watching. Someone is measuring your character not by how you treat the powerful, but by how you treat the vulnerable. Not by how you behave when people are watching, but by who you are when you think no one important can see. And that, more than anything else, determines your true worth. Thank you for watching this story until the end. I truly appreciate you being here. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below and tell me what lesson resonated with you most. I read every single comment, and I would love to know your thoughts. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. We post videos every week filled with life lessons and emotional journeys that will stay with you long after the video ends. Until next time, remember this: treat everyone with kindness, not because they might turn out to be secretly powerful, not because you might benefit from their good opinion, but because kindness is simply the right thing to do, because the measure of your character is how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. Gabriel Winters discovered the hard way that the family he married into valued appearance over substance. The Hartley family discovered the hard way that their shallow values would cost them everything they had built. But maybe somewhere, there is still time for all of us. Time to look past the surface. Time to value character over status. Time to treat every person we meet with the dignity and respect they deserve as human beings. The choice is ours. Every day, every interaction, every moment. Choose wisely. I will see you in the next video.